House MD and Battlestar Galactica. The House fetus, in seasons 1 and 2 only, I will emphatically state, is resolutely secular, conceived not as an unborn soul, but as a benign or malignant parasite. The program implicitly challenges the Christian right's view of pregnancy, reproductive rights, and more broadly, normality and family values. Galactica ups the ante, grappling with religious issues and allowing for the possibility that God or gods exist, and that fervent religious belief can operate outside of a right-wing framework. Notwithstanding their many differences, both ask us to question the conservative Christian supposition that a fetus has rights and an ontological personhood superseding the rights and personhood of the woman who carries it. Only Galactica, though, is able to break free of the dominant TV formula whereby fervent and authentic, but not extremist or dangerous, religious belief can only be associated with Catholicism, and whereby religious sentiment is inevitably associated with conservative values. In the longer version of the paper, I go more into this idea about Catholicism as the normal way to be a fervent believer on television. Galactica allows for the possibility of a sacred fetus child as part of its religious mythology, but it also points to the very real dangers of sacralizing the unborn. In 1972, Maude had primetime television's first abortion. Meanwhile, her husband Walter debated undergoing a vasectomy. Although both Catholics and born-agains attacked the show, it was ultimately complaints about poor taste that dominated the protest letters received by CBS. The sitcom was simply not an acceptable format for discussing reproductive politics, according to both pro-choice and pro-life viewers. Though some of the humor does not date well, the show's best singer occurs when Walter notes his schedule for the day, and Maude dryly retorts, "Vasectomy after golf. It sounds like a new play by Noel Coward." This kind of talk simply went too far for the Lawrence Welk crowd. 30 years elapsed between Maude's abortion and Everwood's primetime abortion in 2002. There were other peripheral abortions on American TV between 1972 and 2002, but Everwood stands out for its event status. The producers loudly staked a claim for the abortion episode as important and provocative. That the producers were, on some level, scared stiff is indicated by the title of the episode itself. If Maude's Dilemma was not a straightforward pro-choice title, it did at least point to pregnancy as a potential problem. The Everwood show on abortion has the disconcertingly neutral title, Episode 20. At the end of the episode, a pro-life Catholic abortionist goes to church to confess his sins, in a move that seems guaranteed to offend both pro-choice and pro-life viewers. In stark contrast to Everwood, House treats pregnancy as an ethically neutral medical condition, or more often as a medical problem. In the first 2 seasons of House, the fetus is resolutely secular, conceived not as an unborn soul, but as a benign or malignant parasite. House's critique of the mythological normal family works precisely because the producers do not promote their attacks on the concept of normality as controversial, and because they do not, in the brilliant first 2 seasons, single out episodes as special events dealing with special issues. House takes as its very foundation the premise that relationships and families are dysfunctional and even pathological. So when a character is sick because she is getting fertility treatments but also surreptitiously taking birth control pills because her husband wants more children but she secretly does not, no one remarks that she is in effect engaged in a kind of constant self-induced abortion. On House, fetus and mother rarely exist in a symbiotic relationship. In fact, in the episode Maternity, Dr. House tells a clinic patient plagued by nausea and inexplicable weight gain, "You have a parasite." The panicked patient responds, "Like a tapeworm or something? Can you do anything about it?" House counters, "Only for about a month or so. After that, it becomes illegal to remove, except in a couple of states." In a sarcastic attempt at reassurance, he adds, "Don't worry, many women learn to embrace this parasite. They name it, dress it up in tiny clothes, arrange play dates with other parasites." Fetuses make women and girls sick on House and are usually terminated. The word abortion is used infrequently, I think, to distance the program from engaging in an overt pro-life, pro-choice debate. Fetal removal is simply conceived as an often necessary medical procedure. In the first 2 seasons, the show works hard to distance itself from sentimental depictions of the family and maternity, and in doing so distances itself from the fundamentalist and more generally conservative pro-family discourse. Further, right and wrong are not absolutes on the show. Its situational ethics are the polar opposite of the black-white morality promoted by American fundamentalist activist politicians and pro-family groups. On occasion, however, the program does go out of its way to deal directly with religion. In the episode Damned If You Do, House cures a nun, Sister Augustine, who suffers from a mysterious allergy. When House fails to convince her to stay in the hospital, he complains to his sidekick, Wilson. She says she has God inside her. It would have been easier to deal with a tumor. Wilson quips, maybe she's allergic to God, inspiring House to do a full body scan, revealing a cross on the scan monitor. It turns out that when Augustine was a teenager, she self-induced an abortion. When she was hospitalized afterwards, her doctors did not see the IUD hidden in her endometrial tissue. The device is a copper cross, a faulty technology that was pulled from the market in the 1980s. Augustine is allergic to copper. Before the cross is explained, it appears visually on the screen as a divine symbol. God really was inside of her. But what appears to be God ultimately has a purely rational explanation, again reinforcing the show's prioritizing of science over faith. Afterwards, asked how the patient is doing, House responds, you know how it is with nuns, you take out their IUDs and they just bounce right back. Though House is flippant throughout, Damned If You Do does nonetheless provide a genuine opportunity to debate the meaning of faith. House could certainly return to its radically negative roots, but for the moment the show has swerved from its interesting original impulse, losing sight of its critique of conventionality and its near-obsessive focus on denaturalizing pregnancy and even the very core of identity. By the time season 3 concluded, the show's subversive procedural plots had become fully secondary to the concern with making House into a better, more conventional person. In fact, in one season 3 episode, House is shown as wrong for advocating a medically necessary late-term abortion, and the episode ultimately takes a pro-life stance, going so far as to show the fetus's hand grabbing House's hand while he operates on it, in vitro. So much for situational ethics and moral ambiguity. Battlestar Galactica takes a very different approach in its insistent investigation of feminism, reproductive rights, and wide varieties of religious belief. Galactica uses its alternate universe status to challenge the norms of our world, creating allegorical narratives that raise concerns about contemporary America, and in particular the war in Iraq. But the show's most potent statement about contemporary politics may lie in its approach to representing reproductive choice, particularly in its first 2 seasons. Further, Galactica allows for the possibility of competing religious points of view without lapsing into Manichaean reductionism. The show never clearly maintains that any single religion is more legitimate than another. And this is unique on television, where conflicts over faith are more often boiled down to one person believing and the other person not, with the believer typically positioned as the conservative character and the non-believer positioned as the liberal. Galactica has a better grasp on how religion and politics are intimately connected than any other more realistic drama on television. The show's contention that religion and politics are always interconnected is perhaps clearest when the pro-choice President Rosalynn reluctantly outlaws abortion to encourage population growth. In an earlier episode, we've seen that in this post-apocalyptic world, women are increasingly turning to prostitution simply to survive. Mothers are particularly likely to be forced into sex work because it's the only way they can afford black market necessities like antibiotics for their children. Clearly, then, the president has erred in criminalizing abortion. The only ethical way to enable population growth is to create a world worth repopulating. Notably, Rosalynn tells off a Geminian fundamentalist, denying her demand to punish a young woman who had an abortion shortly before Rosalynn made the procedure illegal. Rosalynn curtly dismisses her, quote, "You have your pound of flesh, and I suggest you take your victory and you move on." On the surface, the president is only indicating that the woman should let well enough alone, since she technically won. Yet what is more important here is the language Rosalynn uses. She references Shakespeare, who of course simply does not exist in Galactica's universe of non-Earthlings. This strange, completely anomalous gap tells us 2 things. We must read this exchange as directly germane to our world, and Rosalynn knows that she has erred, for there's no such thing as a pound of flesh without an ounce of blood. The population count is going to decline even faster once the coat hanger abortions begin. And I'll note that more recently, Guy Baltar on one of his pirate radio broadcasts referenced Shakespeare again when he suggested that we cast off this mortal coil. But you can barely kind of hear it, and I'd like to sort of transcribe the Guy Baltar broadcast and see what else is going on sort of under the wire with that. Rosalynn has done the wrong thing, but for the right reasons. The show's cogent positioning of Rosalynn as a flawed heroine makes clear its feminist agenda. Galactica argues consistently and aggressively that women must be in control of their own bodies. This control is defined in terms of both sexuality and reproduction. And the point's driven home in particular by the episode The Farm, in which Cylons hook up women to machines and turn them into incubators. The show repeatedly reinforces the injustice of denying reproductive freedom. Furthermore, this is done within the context of the masculine generic conventions of science fiction and action-adventure. Though melodrama is never far away, on Galactica the personal is always framed within an explicitly political context. So, to move towards a conclusion, after a long period of silence, abortion is gradually beginning to appear more often on television. Have TV producers